Time to dig into our viewer mail again to hear what all of you have to say about the show, about me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. First up, a segment we did on how legislators appear to be relying on profanity and cursing more than ever. I argued that all that did was to inflame already tense and difficult situations for the country. Elizabeth from Levittown, New York writes, there are 19 dead children and 2 dead teachers, and you're concerned about profanity. That's what you're worried about? What an effing joke. The police did nothing while they all died. Try being outraged about that. Come on, I am. I want solutions, not just people cursing at one another or simply saying the most outrageous thing they can because they have no new ideas or thoughts on how to change things. And that's why, by the way, I did the segment earlier about sensible gun laws. Scott on Twitter says, thank you at Dan Abrams for your piece on lawmakers and swearing. I've always taught my kids that swearing is the last resort of a poor vocabulary. In the light of recent events, I find myself swearing often. Excellent piece and an eye-opener. Thanks, Scott. Marguerite from Cambridge, Wisconsin. As a now retired teacher of 44 years, I can say that my 7th and 8th graders would often comment on language used by people in Congress, those running for office, etc. While some of the students found it funny, many more said that when these adults swear as they do, it makes them less respected in their eyes. These adults need to realize that they have the ability and power to influence children and teens in positive ways. I just wish they'd choose to use their words to build up rather than tear down. Thanks for an interesting discussion. Well said, Marguerite. Thank you for that. I think it's a really important point. Lawmakers have to remember they're role models for kids like the ones you taught. Duke from Northport, Michigan hopes that all the swearing is actually an emotional release for the country. Dan, your piece on the public swearing is noted as a fairly new phenomenon. If you notice, it mirrors the advent of the Trump presidency, not that Trump swore. What he brought into play was obvious but subtle. He made insulting people in public normal. He said stuff as President of the United States is rolling off his mind at the moment, like endless constant comments deriding, calling people names out loud in public and on media. Now the rage is built, so it will now be a new normal. The raging in public is an outlet right now. Hopefully it's cathartic. That's the true First Amendment in play. Look, no one's debating the right to drop an F-bomb, Duke. It's just whether it's the right thing to do. The extremes on both sides, though, have introduced this kind of rhetoric. Todd of Davis Junction, Illinois, writes in about the Uvalde, Texas shooting. As a retired police lieutenant who once responded to an active shooting incident, I am concerned by the statements being made by law enforcement officials in Uvalde and elsewhere, expert commentators for mass media outlets. Every second counts. Seconds mean lives. Columbine and Virginia Tech demonstrated that setting up containment and waiting for squat is a recipe for disaster. That lesson was learned over 20 years ago, and here we are again. Thank you, Todd. We had questioned the police response on this show, which Paul from Weaverville, North Carolina, feels may not be fair. Slow down on the criticism of police in Texas. 100 to 200 shots were taken in the first 4 minutes. It's plenty of shots to kill everyone inside the classroom. If subsequent shots are toward the police, it's unlikely anyone inside the classroom is still alive. The 911 calls were likely coming from other classrooms. Even if the police spokesman says the wrong decision was made, it's still too early to be certain. There's no reason to sacrifice officers if the chance of survivors is remote. Well, look, Paul, how slow do you want to take this? We now know there were children alive in that classroom, and they were calling 911 from inside the same room as the shooter. It also seems to violate standard police practices for active shooters, but we shall see. I'll wait to make any final judgments. Next up, Donna from Stuart, Florida, who writes about my down-the-middle approach. While I genuinely appreciate your commitment to maintain a centrist posture, I got to say that your criticism of your competitors, especially those to your left, too often smells too much like it's being done to enhance your own interests, particularly when you're calling them out for having opinions or setting airtime priorities. Donna, I am not calling them out for having opinions or setting airtime priorities. I'm calling them out for having those opinions or for their choices on airtime priorities. Renette from Springfield, Missouri writes in about another viewer whose email got featured on the show last week. That viewer called me a conservative for instead of focusing strictly on gun control, for urging politicians, school officials, and law enforcement to act on red flags when they see them to prevent mass shootings. Renette says, I'm glad that Jody from Germantown, Tennessee could figure out that you're a conservative because day after day I try to figure out how you vote. And for the life of me, I have no idea. Keep doing what you do and keep trying to bring live PD back. I miss all the officers. Thanks, Renette. I miss them too. and am keeping up the fight. Stay tuned. Next, Paige from Chesterfield was none too thrilled about a segment we did on officials in Utah charging a hunting guide with a felony for illegally baiting a bear during a hunting trip with Donald Trump Jr., where he killed the bear. I wondered why the charges are being brought now and what the law really is. Paige didn't think it was worth bringing up at all. With all of Hunter Biden's illicit dealings, how is it that Donald Trump Jr. allegedly killing a bear illegally makes the news? Paige, we pointed out prosecutors went so far as to call Don Jr. a victim. But believe it or not, we can cover both Hunter Biden, as we have many times, and this interesting incident involving a hunting guide and Don Jr. David from the town of Tonawanda, New York, has this. Dan, you are fair and unbiased. You have totally drawn me away from watching Fox News. Just one thing, we know about your successful TV shows, but I don't think you have to mention you started them every time you bring them up. Well, look, I actually hate having to say I founded this or I own that every time one of my media properties comes up on the show. It's annoying, but it's for transparency. I only say that so no one accuses me later of failing to disclose my relationship. I'm not trying to brag. I wish I didn't have to do it. Finally, Deborah from Denton, Texas, writes to say thank you for being the last major news reporter that still just reports the facts. You don't rant and rave about your own opinion. Dan Rather, David Brinkley, Walter Cronkite are rolling in their graves right now. However, they're proud of you. Hope you keep your real deal journalistic principles. You are from a nearly extinct breed. Thank you, Deborah, although Dan Rather is alive and tweeting. Thank you for all of your comments. Keep them coming. Go to our website, newsnationnow.com/DAL. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.